In today's video, I'm going to give you 5 major business expenses that you need to be aware of if you are starting a residential assisted living facility. Make sure you stick around if you want to learn what those 5 major business. Hey everybody, it's Brandon Gustafson. Welcome back to Assisted Living Investing. Happy to have you on the channel with me today. In today's video, we're going to get into 5 major business expenses that you need to be aware of as you kind of start the process of getting into your assisted living facility. If you want to see what these expenses look like on a calculator, make sure you get over to assistedlivinginvesting.net. I'll link that down below in the bio of the video so that you can go over there. But I've got a free underwriting calculator you can go and download, and on there I've got a tab that is expenses, and what I've done with that is the buildings that I've purchased and also other ones that I've looked at, I've kind of compiled them into a nice expense list and giving you a pretty good feel for what those expenses might look like for your facility. So percentage wise, you can kind of start getting a feel for what those look like. So if you're interested in learning about that or following along as I go through the process here on this video, then get over to the website. Make sure you download the calculator. When you do, you're going to get a few other emails around kind of a work plan that I have developed, a 12-week plan with tips and tricks and action items to get you started on your journey while you're waiting for me to get that course out to you, which I'm working on a lot right now. We'll get that out to you here pretty quick, and I'll make sure it's affordable so that it kind of gets you through the process so you can really get a good head start in starting your own assisted living facility. With all that said, let's get into the video topic of today, the 5 major expenses that you need to be aware of as you're starting an assisted living facility. Number 1 is staffing. I think you know this if you've watched any of my videos, anybody else's videos, or just thought about this in general. You know that staffing is going to be a huge expense for you as you get started with your assisted living facility. It costs a lot of money to pay people so that they can have a living wage. With our expenses, I was just looking at it before I recorded this video. In 2022, so our last calendar year, our wages were about 40% of our total expenses over the course of the year on average, about 40%. It's a huge chunk of money that you are paying to these people, so you need to be aware of it. You have to pay people competitive wages so that you keep them and don't have turnover. There's going to be some taxes involved with that. There's going to be workers' comp insurance if you're doing benefits, just the whole wages portion of it. I think you need to plan on your expenses in that section being between 35 and 50%, honestly, is where you need that to land. Big expense, but you need to know that going into it. And if you're starting an assisted living facility, I hope you've given that some thought that you're going to be doing that. There are some ways for you to get around it. If you're the one that's working in the facility, obviously it's like a business expense for it, but then you're not paying yourself out of the business, the profit. Like there's ways to kind of get around that. So as you get into it, there's ways for you to kind of look at that and get more familiar with the expenses. But I would plan on 35 to 50% of your total operating budget being related to staffing. The second big one that I'll say is debt service. So this is you've got a loan and you're working with the bank to do this, or you've developed some kind of a thing that's seller financing with the previous owner, and so you're trying to make those payments. It's another huge chunk for us. It's, I would say, about 10%. Something that you want to be aware of if you do an SBA loan is it's not a fixed rate. It is adjustable, and it adjusts based off of the prime rate, which is tied to what the Fed is doing with rates. So right now it's going up, which is kind of a pain for us. So it's something you want to be aware of, but our payments have gone up quite a bit over the past year and a half or so since the Fed has started playing with rates, and it's having a pretty significant impact on our operating budget. So right now it's actually probably a little bit higher. As when I looked at our 2022 numbers, it was about 10% of our operating budget was for debt service. I'd say it's probably 12-13% now actually. So something you just kind of want to be aware of. It's a big payment that you've got to make, and you have to make it every single time, or the bank's going to come take the house from you. So you have to make that payment. It's extremely important for you to have that in place. The third major expense that I'm going to talk to you about is insurance. There's a lot of different insurance that you've got to get. You've got to have property insurance. You have to have liability insurance, workers' comp insurance. There might be other insurances that you have to have in place that is required by the lender or by the state health agency. You need to make sure that you have these different types of insurances in place. So I highly suggest getting with an insurance broker. They're going to help you find the best pricing for insurance and make sure that you have the exact coverage that you need, and they'll kind of walk you through the process if you have a claim. So insurance brokers are excellent. They don't cost you anything up front. They get paid a cut from the insurance when you pay the premiums. So not a big deal there, but I would say our insurance is probably close to that 10% again, maybe even slightly higher. It's going to depend on your specific situation, the type of insurance that you can get. I would say in the beginning, you're probably going to have higher rates just because you don't have the track record and the history showing what you can do with a facility. But as you operate and then you show that you are good, your insurance premiums will likely come down. But insurance, huge expense that you need to be aware of. Expense number 4 is groceries. So you got to feed your residents. You got to make sure you're there. In our 16-bed facilities, our grocery budget is probably about 9-10%. So a little bit less than 10% is typically what we're seeing there from a grocery perspective. But it's huge. It's a big expense for you to be able to go in and pay or feed your people, to buy all the food and make sure your pantry's stocked and make sure you're complying with the rules. Each state's going to have a different rule as to how much food needs to be on hand and for how long. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 4 weeks, but you're going to have to, especially in the beginning, build up that pantry of food so that it's available for your residents. And the 5th major expense that you need to be aware of is your utilities. So you got to pay for water, power, gas, and those types of things. You can do this on like a balanced budget. If you've been there for about a year, they can look at that and see what it's going to look like, or you can just pay it automatically. And then there's some seasonality with it, but in general, I would say our budget for utilities is between 5 and 7% of our total budget. So it kind of gives you an idea of what it costs for you to operate your facility from that standpoint, from your utilities. You got to make sure that you have those things in place. You're paying those bills so they don't turn off the water. So you have gas, so you have hot water, so that you have electricity and can watch TV. Those types of things, you need to make sure that you have that all in place. So I'm going to do some quick math here. Let's see. Yeah, so that is, if I added that all up correctly, those 5 major expenses account for about 75% of our total operating budget. There are a bunch of other things that go into that. I was just looking at our profit and loss statement to see what our expenses were for 2022, and we had, 20 budget categories. So those 5 are 25% of all of the budget categories, but they make up 75% of the operational budget. So things you want to kind of take into consideration, what it's going to look like and exactly what those are. And you can extrapolate that if you want to look at that and see what they might be for you in your specific circumstance. You have an idea of a facility that you want to buy. Make sure you get over to Assisted Living Investing and assistedlivinginvesting.net and download that underwriting calculator. It's free. It gives you a lot of good information. You can fill it in, start adjusting your numbers, and make sure that kind of the guidelines I've given you here are kind of in line with what your operating budget is and what you would expect from that, and that will give you a really good overview of what it's going to cost you to operate your facility, however many beds you have in your specific circumstance. But this is going to give you an idea of what that's going to cost and where those big buckets are. So make sure you get over there and download that underwriting calculator. Are you interested in learning more about residential assisted living, but you don't know how to get started? At assistedlivinginvesting.net, we're here to help you through the process, start to finish. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.